Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a little bit of a special review. This is going to be the first of two Easter beers that I review for you here on the channel. I don't really do Easter beers all that often, but I thought these two that I picked out would be quite interesting, so I hope you guys enjoy them. But for this review we are going to stick to Sweden. We're going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in. We're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition. And for this review we are going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, and in recent months they've been putting out a few different styles, which has been really quite interesting, and it's another different style that we're going to have a look at today, and I'm curious to see how they interpret it in fact, because in honesty this is a style that I generally speaking don't like. So let's see how we get on with this one. Fingers crossed it's a good beer. But yeah, for this review then we are going to head to the Gamlestaden area of the city, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Spike Brewery. So this particular beer is called the Easturn Twang. It comes in at 5.8% ABV, and this one is an ESB, so an extra strong bitter, extra special bitter, or just an English bitter, I guess we could call this one. So yeah, I think this should be really quite interesting. As I was saying a second ago, English bitters are not my favourite style of beer, but oddly enough the ones that I've had that have been brewed in Sweden have actually been quite nice. The Brewery bitter from Nynäshamns Ång Brewery and the Örebro bitter from Närke Kulta Brewery. Both of those were really nice, but I suspect that was because they had the American hops in them, to be honest. But yeah, I think this should be really interesting to try. I've had some really good beers from Spike over the years, as I said, and maybe I just need to be a little bit more open-minded with this style. But when it comes to English traditional beer, in honesty, I'm not a great fan of the lighter side of things. For me, the darker English beers are a lot better. I love porters, I love stouts, and a mild is pretty nice as well, actually. Basically the English equivalent of a Dunkel, come to think of it. But yeah, really curious to see how this one turns out. It's been a long time since I reviewed an ESB. I think the last one actually would have been London Pride, come to think of it. So yeah, fingers crossed this turns out to be a good beer. Curious to try an ESB after quite a bit of time, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this one. This beer was released as part of the Easter release. I think it was on the 1st of April, if I remember rightly, or maybe a little bit before that. It could have been maybe about the 15th of March. I don't know. It was released sometime when the Easter beers were released through Systembolaget here in Sweden. They had a special beer release with about 60 different things. But yeah, as I say, looking forward to trying this one at a 5.8% ESB, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Spike Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future, because I do keep an eye out on what these guys are releasing. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Spike Brewery then, on to my brewery notes. So Spike Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2014 by Mats Westberg, Marcus Axberg and Martin Johansson. So all three of these guys had worked previously in the IT industry, but it's now only Mats and Marcus that are still active in the company, but they do now have David de Surcy as well, who joined the company and became the CEO, and he's very active. He's the one that kind of goes out and presents a lot of the different things when this brewery is doing its stuff, which is pretty cool. Very nice guy. I did actually meet him when I was in Gothenburg before. But the brewer is Bernardo Hava. He comes from Brazil, and he trained in brewing at VLB down in Berlin, and then joined the company a couple of years after they were founded. He joined them in 2017. But at the moment, these guys are producing around 250,000 litres of beer per year, and about 25% of their brewing volume is used for contract brewing other breweries' beers. But you can find the brewery, as I mentioned earlier, in the Gamlestaden area. It's actually in an old slaughterhouse, Slakthuset I think they call it. So when you go in, There's like bullet holes in the walls and all of these kind of things. It's just, you know, craziness. But they've got an on-site tap room as well, which opens up on Saturdays, and they also serve food there sometimes as well, which is good. So I would recommend that you go and check that out. And if you're interested, you can check out my Out and About video that I did in the Out and About playlist on the channel homepage. It is worth doing that actually. That was quite a fun video to film. But they're looking at the moment at opportunities to build their own brewery, and as of April 2021, when I'm reviewing this particular beer for you, they've produced around 105 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. I think I've reviewed somewhere in the region of 20-25 different beers from this brewery now. But yeah, always cool to try new things from them, as I say, but that's all I can really tell you about the brewery for the moment. Hopefully we can get these guys on the channel for a Meet the Brewery segment at some stage. That would be really fun. But yeah, that's it for the history section. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. I think they've just remodeled it recently and it actually looks really, really nice. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done, and there are going to constantly be new beers every month basically. But yeah, let's get on and have a little look at the tasting section then. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this beer before we open it up. As you can see, it is quite Easter themed, nice bright and yellow and things like that, like a fluffy chicken. But yeah, nicely presented as you always get from Spike Brewing. They've got this kind of graffiti style artwork on quite a number of their beers now, which I think is very nice. But yeah, 440ml can, this one. I think I paid about 40 Swedish kroners for this, come to think of it. So that's roughly about €4, maybe about £3.50, maybe $5 American for those of you watching in different places. But yeah, like I said, 5.8% ESB this one, extra strong bitter, extra special bitter, or just an English bitter. So yeah, quite curious to see how this one turns out. The other thing I can tell you is that this one is hopped with Fuggles hops, which I remember gives you this kind of ashy type flavour actually, so I'm curious to see how that translates into this beer. But yeah, let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. My first ESB in what must maybe about 2 years or something, so this could be a really interesting one. So yeah, we'll see. We'll definitely see about this. There we are. I think that'll do for the moment, and we'll put the rest of it in a little bit later. Check it's in the position for my OCD, and there we go. So yeah, as you can see then, oh, this beer actually does have a wee bit of sediment and stuff in it. Maybe I had the fridge too cold. But yeah, looks interesting actually. So as you can see, this beer is poured with about a 3/4 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy, fawny coloured head. I think you guys can see that on the camera there, but it is very, very foamy. And the colour of this beer is actually a nice, rich amber, come to think of it. But I'm not sure how well you guys can see that. There are quite a few bits of particle. There are quite a few big bits of particle kind of floating in suspension throughout the beer. So it's had a fair wee bit of sedimentation, which is interesting. So yeah, that is kind of interesting. But yeah, English bitters can be this sort of ambery, slightly copper colour. This isn't uncommon. Remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on 1, the type of malts that you use, and then 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker beer. I'm not sure how long a boil a traditional English bitter would undergo. I'm guessing maybe about 90 minutes or something, but it probably has a few kind of biscuit and caramels and Maris Otter and things like that in it, so I'm not surprised that it is a more kind of coppery colour like this, because it is, you know, it's a fairly malty leaning beer, the bitter, come to think of it. But yeah, the thing that really put me off bitters a lot of the time was I didn't really like the kind of big grainy sort of thing of it, and for me, the English hops, I just think, you know, English hops, generally speaking, work better in darker beers. I've never been a great fan of the lighter side of English traditional beers, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, in terms of an English bitter, this one doesn't look, it's not really, there's nothing surprising going on with the appearance of this one. So yeah, I guess we should take a closer look at the aroma and see how we go with it. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of what you would expect. It actually does smell quite nice. This is the thing, I always did think the ESBs smelled pretty nice. They always had a bit of a nice kind of almost winter warmery type vibe to them. But yeah, it does smell pretty damn authentic, I think, fair to say that. You know, if this beer would actually last, I would take a couple of cans of this to give to the English beer tubers and see what they think. So maybe I'll do that actually with the Badero and the Urobro bitters. I'll maybe give a couple of bottles of them to some of the English beer tubers and just see what they think. That would be quite interesting to see what they think of the Swedish takes on these traditional English styles. But yeah, the aroma of this one is actually fairly nice. So I mean, straight away on the nose, you get a lot of kind of grainy character out of this one, and that's typical of the style. So for me, there's a brown bready base to this one. It's like a wholemeal bready base. There's a good little bit of bread crust, which I think is quite nice. I do like the bready side of these beers, I have to say. But yeah, it doesn't really have a toasty, grainy sort of thing with it. It's almost a little bit kind of rye-like. Does it actually have rye in it? No, it's malted barley. So yeah, but yeah, these beers always just smell really grainy. So I'm guessing there's a few varieties of English malt that just give you this really kind of grainy, vibe to them. But yeah, brown wholemeal bread all the way. Really it's almost got like a kind of raw rye type thing to it, but as I say, there's no rye in this beer. You do get a bit of sweetness out of it. There is a teeny little bit of a kind of toasty brown sugar in there, a bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuit, but the malt base is kind of pretty much straight up in that sense. It's brown bread, it's grains, a little bit of biscuit, a little bit of sweetness, and that's about it. There's one or two little woody undertones in there. Did I get a wee bit of nuttiness? Maybe a tiny little hint of a kind of nutty character or something like that, but otherwise no. All about the grains and the bread crust and stuff like this. So yeah, it does actually smell fairly nice in terms of the aroma then, but you know, quite straight shooting. But to be fair, that is what I would expect of this particular style. But yeah, interesting. On the hoppy side of things then, this is where it gets interesting, because Fugo, like I say, has that ashy character, and I'm curious to see how that comes across both in the flavour and the the aroma. So yeah, with this beer you get that distinctive earthiness out of this one, and you get quite a bit of herbal character. But the thing with Fuggles is it has this just ashy undertone to it, and you can smell that in the earthy side of the beer. You can smell it in the herbal part of it as well. For me, generally speaking, if you compare English hops to German hops, for example, and the Czech ones, you know, the more continental European noble hops, for me the continental hops are a lot nicer, generally speaking. Because they've got a lovely kind of big bright floral aromatic note, a kind of more zesty grassiness. The English hops are a little bit more kind of herbal and earthy, I've always found, and the grassiness is a little bit more kind of subdued in a sense. But I think Fuggles, some of the English hops can be quite nice, but Fuggles is one that I've just honestly never taken to. I just didn't like that kind of ashy character that it had, and you can smell that a lot in this beer, in honesty. And it's just the main reason I got this one was because I wanted to see, right, you know, can I actually get used to the English bitter and appreciate it as a style? You know, it's like with sour beers. I never used to be that into sour beers, but now I love them. So yeah, maybe I just need a little bit more time with it. But yeah, you can smell that earthiness in there, the herbal quality, then you've just got that ashiness from the Fuggle coming out of it as well. Further forward on the nose, you do get a little bit of a brighter floral aromatic note, and there's a wee touch of a grassy character on the front of the nose too, which is nice. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, how would we describe that? It has got a wee bit of a kind of reddy, like a sharper reddy, red figgy, red curranty type thing coming out of it. But there's a few sort of appley, peary kind of things going on as well. Actually, the bitter was always quite an interesting beer in terms of its fruitiness. I always found it had a little bit of a slightly sultana type note to it, but you would always get this just little hint of you know, red berry and sort of yeah, red berry, red currant sort of thing out of it, and you definitely get that in this one. There's a wee touch of that figgy element to it. But yeah, the aroma on this one, I think, it's quite interesting. Again, this beer, in terms of aroma profile, it's very authentic to what you should get from a traditional style English bitter. So yeah, let's have a taste of this then and see how we get on. So this one is the as I always say, take a bit of time and just ponder over the aroma of this one, especially if you're drinking this as a Swede. This is a style you're not going to come across all that often, so it is worth trying. It is worth just, you know, pondering it over a little bit. But yeah, this one is the Easturn Twang 5.8% English Special Bitter, or English Bitter, ESB, whatever, from Spike Brewery in the Gamlestaden area in Gothenburg up on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Slanja, skål, glad påsk, happy Easter. It's alright actually, yeah. Yeah, that is actually all right. Yeah, I can finish. I'll be able to finish the can of this. Wouldn't worry about that. I could get more sediment in this one. I wonder why there's so much sediment in this can. Oh, lost a little bit. Just as well, the floor's concrete. It's fine. Yeah, I'll be able to finish this can. No worries about that. Just check for the OCD. There we go. But yeah, that does look like a nice beer actually. Once you put the rest of it in, you can see how much sediment there is, though. I might pour out the last little bit of it, as I say, but yeah, it looks pretty nice. It is pretty nice. It is actually. If I was tasting this one blind, actually, I don't know what I would guess this is. I think on the aftertaste, you can tell it's an English bitter, but to me it would come across in the middle of the flavour. It actually comes across a little bit more like a kind of amber ale or something like this. So yeah, I'm not sure if I would be able to tell what this is. It's a blind taste, but then, you know, as I say, I very rarely drink English bitters, so that's probably, I guess, maybe a given, maybe stating the obvious. But yeah, let's see how we can describe the flavour of this one then. I will say that this beer, in terms of its flavour, it actually matches the aroma profile fairly well, to be honest with you. But yeah, straight away you can feel that nice kind of brown bready quality just blanketing the middle of your palate there. Some of the graininess comes out of it a little bit later as well, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, it's interesting how that side of the beer goes about its business as well, definitely. So yeah, where to start with this one? In terms of the middle third of your palate then, so straight away you get that nice brown bready quality just blanket in the middle of your palate. As you progress further into the aftertaste, you'll notice that particularly on the front half of that front third of your tongue, it develops a few little kind of woody undertones. The nuttiness that I was picking up in the aromas, no there. There's no nuttiness to this beer. It is a little bit woody underneath though. But yeah, wholemealy brown bready base, a little bit of a woody character to it. And it does get a bit, particularly in the front half, you get a little bit more of a kind of grainy rye type thing out of this beer, which is quite interesting. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the base layer of the beer, but if you go to the very centre of your palate, you definitely get a nice little bit of a kind of caramelly, brown sugary element to this one, and it's quite a bright, sweet caramel in the very centre of your palate there. But as you move further out from that, it does get a little bit more of a slightly kind of toasty brown sugar element to it, and then towards the edges of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of biscuity, McVitie's digestive sort of thing to it. So yeah, quite interesting actually. I like how this beer, I do like how the malty side of this one goes about its business. And the thing that I think I should say about this one as well, before we move on to the hoppy side of the beer, the Fuggles don't overpower the beer too much actually. So maybe they've used them as a kind of late addition, and they've got another hop in here as the early as the early edition as well. Because I think that could have been why I didn't like Fuggles initially, was just that it was maybe used a bit too intensely in the early edition in the brew. But yeah, this beer, it can grow on me a little bit. It will grow on me a little bit, I'm sure. But yeah, what I will say as well about it is this is definitely not the kind of craziest and most exciting beer that you're going to find from Spike Brewery, by no means. Definitely not. I think this one's more kind of done as a novelty rather than anything else. But what they have shown in recent times is that they can actually do the malty side of things quite nicely. I mean, they had that American strong ale that we reviewed recently. We had the barley wine And now we've got this one. So they've done quite a few more malty leaning beers. I mean, they've done imperial stouts. I say that they've done imperial stouts very well for a long time, but more brown beers, I guess you could say, than black beers. And they've been doing a couple of these recently and been doing very well with them, in my opinion. So well done to Spike Brewery for this one. Actually, I think it works well. So yeah, the malty side of this one, I think it does get a little bit sweeter the further you go into the aftertaste as well, and the graininess kind of mellows out a little bit. But yeah, it certainly works. It works. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of breadiness just kind of building up a little bit, so you get a bit of a slightly thicker breadiness on that border region and a bit of a toasty grainy element there kind of sitting on top of it. Then as you go on to the back third of your palate, it becomes mainly toasty and grainy. Absolutely, it does become really kind of toasty and grainy on that back third of your palate actually. So yeah, you can feel the yeast kind of sitting on top of that, so it gets a bit more of a kind of yeasty quality. You can feel the sort of height of the flavour sitting there. The flavour is a bit taller on that back third of your palate. So as you start from the back third of your tongue, you can feel the flavour sort of, it gradually just sort of condenses down, if you like, and then on the border region it goes like this, and then you can feel the middle third of your palate is distinctly more kind of condensed and the flavours are closer in together. But yeah, it's nice how the middle of your palate goes together in this one. But yeah, I don't think we have too much more that we can say about the middle of the palate and the malty side of things. So let's focus on the hoppy part of the beer then. So in the back corners of the palate, you do have a little bit of earthiness in this one. And it's actually a fairly smooth earthiness. It does actually have a little bit of smoothness to it, but as you move further forward, it really gets more herbal. And it takes, if you go along the front sides of your palate, it really does take quite a little bit of time for the floral side of the beer to come out, which is quite interesting. So yeah, that's interesting for sure, definitely. But you can feel a little bit of that slight kind of ashiness sitting on top of the earthiness, and that's, as I say, one of the trademarks of the Fuggle hop or Fuggle hop, whatever. But yeah, on the on the front corners of the palate is distinctly a little bit more kind of floral, if you like, and then round the front curve of the palate it's a little bit lighter and grassy. So yeah, I can certainly appreciate that about this one. It's got the grassiness is quite nice in this beer for sure. It's actually a very well balanced beer, this one, I will say that about it. But like I said, it's not the most kind of striking and crazy beer that you're going to come across from these guys. So yeah, on the front third of your palate then, onto the fruity side of things, I think we've covered the green component quite well. So it is, it leans towards the earthy herbal side of things, which is what you would expect from a bitter, to be honest with you, especially one with Fuggles in it. But yeah, as I always say, on that front third of your palate, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. That comes from the hops, of course. But yeah, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a slightly thicker bready kind of note to it. There is a bit more of a kind of toasty grainy thing there. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a kind of smoother brown wholemeally sort of bread thing. But let's focus on the kind of fruity side of the beer. Let's look at that. So yeah, on the fruity side of things, it is kind of as we described it before. There is a wee bit of a kind of red berryish sharpness to this one when you take it in, but yeah, it is, for me, the base of this beer is quite figgy. It maybe does have a wee touch of a sort of marmalade-y orangey note to it, but that's very minimal. For me, it's more like a kind of figgy, jammy sort of thing you get out of this one. As you move, yeah, it's kind of figgy at the back of that at the back of that front third of your palate. There's maybe a little bit of sultana in here as well, so like a dried white green grapey sort of thing. You do get a little bit of sultana at the back of that front third of your palate. So yeah, sultana's at the back, becomes a little bit more figgy as you move further forward. Then you start to get a wee red curranty thing kind of sitting underneath, and a little bit of a red berryish note the further you go into the aftertaste with it. But yeah, it's definitely got an interesting twist to it, this beer, I have to say. It is quite nicely done. It is a fairly nicely done bitter, this one, and maybe there are bitters that exist like this in England, so maybe I have to be a little bit more kind of open-minded about this style, to be honest, because the ones I've had here in Sweden have been quite nice. Maybe I need to just try a few more ones that are in English. So I maybe need to talk to Hugh, the beer kid, about that, because he's into his traditional German and traditional English things, actually. So yeah. But yeah, that's a solid enough beer for me, that. So yeah, it's a thumbs up from me. See, the ESBs, they're not the most exciting style, but this one has been well crafted, and we've come to expect that from Spike Brewery, in fairness. So fair play to them for doing something a wee bit different, and I'm enjoying that side of this brewery at the moment. But yeah, let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So mid-bodied beer, smooth carbonation. The mouthfeel overall has a little bit of a kind of slick kind of oiliness to it. So that's fine, yeah, kind of slick, oily quality, which is what you would kind of expect. I mean, the Swedish takes on the bitter actually do feel a little bit more kind of, they do come across as a little bit cleaner, if you like. I've always said this about the Scandinavian beers do come across as very clean, I think, just because of the quality of the water and stuff that exists in the Scandinavian countries. So yeah, these beers always come across as a bit cleaner. In terms of bitterness, what would we say about this? I still don't think these, they say bitter, but these beers are not madly bitter, in honesty. I mean, I think this one's probably just about 30 IBUs or something like that, but you do get quite a bitterness out of the graininess in this beer. So the graininess and the hoppiness are both giving you a bit of the bitterness in this beer. So I think, yeah, maybe about 30 IBUs or something like that. I'll have a wee look on Untappd later, but remember, the IBU count is my weakest part of beer reviewing. But yeah, the malty base has a good bit of a kind of grainy, bready sort of thing. There is a degree of sweetness in there as well, and you've got some nice, slightly juicy and slightly oily, fruity characters that come out of this beer as well. So yeah, I think this is it's a nicely crafted beer, this one, and that is what we've come to expect of Spike Brewery. So well done to them for this, something different, and they've pulled it off pretty well. You can't really ask for much more than that when it comes to brewing an ESB. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Easturn Twang, a 5.8% ESB from Spike Brewery in Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. One of my 2 Easter beers that I'm going to review for you on the channel. So the other one will come from Beer Bibliotech later in the day, so you can look forward to that. And I'm curious to see how that one turns out as well. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Spike Brewery as well. It's always nice to hear from you guys that are watching the channel. Check out the brewery, check out my social media, and I will catch you guys very, very soon. My first ESB in about 2 years or something like that. Slange, skål, cheers. Make sure you check out Spike Brewery from Gamla Staden in Gothenburg, Göteborg. Slange, skål, cheers.